The void of space was a harsh and unforgiving landscape, but it was home. Or at least, it had been. Elena Ryker's boots clanged against the steel floor of the command deck, the sound sharp in the tense silence. The Dauntless, her ship, her responsibility, groaned under the pressure of its battle-worn hull. Outside the viewport, the distant shimmer of a dying sun painted the remnants of Earth's fleet in a cold, ethereal light. The star system was already lost, but the war raged on. "We've got incoming!" The voice of Lieutenant O'Neill, her second-in-command, crackled over the comms. Elena's eyes never left the viewport. A Kravarr warship, massive and dark, emerged from the folds of space. Its sleek silhouette cast an ominous shadow over the battered remains of the last space station Earth had left, Vanguard Station Star. The Kravarr didn't need to announce themselves. They had been hunting humanity for decades. No mercy. No quarter. Just extinction. Elena's fingers moved swiftly across the tactical console, accessing the station's sensor grid. There was no surprise here. The Kravarr had been tracking them for days. The only question was, how long could they hold out before the inevitable came crashing down? "Elena!" O'Neill's voice broke her focus. "Our shields are at 60%. If we don't move fast, take us out of the line of fire." Elena cut him off, her voice steady but cold. She tapped a series of keys, the ship's engines roaring to life beneath her. She wasn't about to let her crew die without making the Kravarr bleed. She turned, her expression hardening. "Get the cannons ready. We'll make them regret underestimating us." O'Neill hesitated, then nodded. "Aye, Captain." The Dauntless jolted as the engines fired, pushing the ship away from the station and into open space. Elena gritted her teeth, hands tight on the controls. This was it. She had one shot at making this work. In the distance, the Kravarr's ship loomed larger, a monolithic nightmare of dark metal and glowing red engines. A message flashed on her screen from the Kravarr commander. "Surrender or be destroyed." Elena's lips curled into a grim smile. The Kravarr always gave this ultimatum, always with the same arrogance. They believed humanity had nothing left to fight with, nothing left to hold on to. They were wrong. The Dauntless swerved, the massive Kravarr warship following suit. She could see the enemy fleet now, 3 more ships flanking the main vessel. She wasn't going to win a direct engagement, not with those odds, but if there was one thing humanity knew how to do, it was improvise. "Get the torpedoes in position," she ordered. "I'll distract them. You hit them hard." O'Neill's voice came through, filled with determination. "You're insane, Elena, but if anyone can pull this off, it's you." The crew's fingers danced across consoles, weapons systems coming to life. Elena's eyes flickered back to the Kravarr flagship, now only a few kilometers away. She could practically feel the heat of the enemy's weapons charging. This wasn't going to be a fight of strength, it would be a fight of speed and precision. Elena exhaled sharply and punched the throttle. The Dauntless shot forward, hurtling toward the flagship. The comms crackled as O'Neill shouted, "Captain, they're locking weapons! We need to pull back!" But Elena was already committed. Her ship was a relic that the Kravarr had underestimated. She wasn't going to let that happen again. "They think we're weak," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to anyone. "Let's prove them wrong." Her hands moved across the console in a blur. A quick flash of commands. "Fire the EMP burst, now!" The ship shuddered as a pulse of energy exploded from the Dauntless' core, streaking through space like a deadly pulse of light. The Kravarr ship's targeting systems flared, only to flicker and fail. A direct hit. "Elena! We've got a breach in the starboard engine!" O'Neill yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "I don't care about the damn engine right now," she snapped, her eyes burning with resolve. She leaned into the console, the controls vibrating beneath her hands. "Hit them with everything you've got!" The Dauntless veered hard to port, an impossible angle as Elena took the ship toward the Kravarr flagship's exposed underbelly. The remaining torpedoes launched, streaking toward their target. The Kravarr flagship's shields flickered under the assault, but they held. For a moment, Elena thought it wasn't enough. That they were too late. But then, the explosion. The torpedoes detonated just beneath the flagship's hull, punching through its outer layers of armor. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she saw the fiery rupture in the enemy's hull, the explosion cascading outward in a brilliant bloom of orange and yellow. The Kravarr flagship rocked violently, but the moment didn't last. The flagship's engines fired up again, the other Kravarr ships charging in. They were coming for her. And they weren't going to hold back this time. "Elena, you've got to pull back!" O'Neill's voice was frantic now. But Elena only stared ahead, her eyes fixed on the spiraling chaos before her. She couldn't afford to retreat, not now, not after everything. She reached forward, her hand hovering over the activation button. One more shot. One final gamble. "Take us in," she said quietly, her voice low and determined. Her crew, knowing exactly what she meant, braced themselves. O'Neill swore, but the Dauntless lurched again, plunging straight into the heart of the Kravarr fleet. The next moment, everything went black. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. A shudder ran through the ship as the lights flickered. Elena's head snapped back, the last thing she saw being a shadow, something massive, something far more terrifying than the Kravarr warships. Then, a rumbling explosion shattered the command deck. The Dauntless buckled, and Elena was thrown against the bulkhead, her vision fading. For the first time in years, she felt fear. Elena's eyes flickered open to the harsh hum of emergency lights and the acrid smell of burning circuitry. She was lying in the wreckage of the command deck, the once pristine consoles now twisted and charred. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic, like blood, or maybe it was just the ship's blood. Groaning, she pushed herself upright, her head swimming. The blast had thrown her across the deck like a rag doll, but she was still alive. The same couldn't be said for the rest of her crew. She forced herself to stand, ignoring the pain in her ribs as she reached for her sidearm, securing it to her thigh. "Status?" She rasped into her communicator, the static in her voice betraying the depth of her exhaustion. There was a pause, a few crackles, then O'Neill's voice came through, strained but clear. "We've got damage across all sectors, Captain. Starboard engines are gone, shields are at 30%, and the main reactor is unstable. We lost comms with Vanguard's station. I'm not sure if they're still intact." The news was bad, but it wasn't the worst. Elena's mind worked quickly, calculating the odds. The Kravarr flagship was still out there, and they had no way of knowing if it had been seriously crippled by the Dauntless' last strike. "We're not dead yet," Elena muttered. She reached for the nearest console, sparking with residual power, and tried to access the ship's tactical systems. Her hands moved quickly, a practiced rhythm. "Give me a damage report on the crew. How bad is it?" "The forward crew's gone. Engineering's working on the reactor. Medical's trying to stabilize Commander Kessler. He's in critical condition, Elena." Elena's throat tightened at the mention of Kessler. The old commander had been with her since the early days of the war, his loyalty unshakable. If he was gone... She blinked, pushing the thought from her mind. "I need him alive, O'Neill. Do whatever you have to. We're doing what we can. But the Kravarr aren't waiting for us to regroup." Elena winced. She knew O'Neill was right. The time for mourning was gone. They were still in enemy territory, and the longer they stayed in one place, the more likely they were to be caught. "Get the engine crew working on a jump drive," Elena ordered, wiping the sweat from her brow. "If we can't get out of here, we're dead. Do you hear me?" "I hear you, Captain." She paused for a moment, a plan forming in her mind. It was risky, but there wasn't time to be cautious. "I'll head to the command center," she said, voice steely. "You get those jump drives online. I'll handle the rest." The corridors were eerily quiet as Elena made her way through the Dauntless. The air was still thick with smoke, but the fires had been mostly contained. The ship groaned and shuddered, as though it knew its days were numbered. But she refused to let it fall, not when they were this close to breaking through. She passed through the darkened halls, her boots slapping against the cold metal floor. A few scattered crew members moved in the shadows, their faces grim, their movements quick and purposeful. They were a far cry from the optimistic soldiers who'd once walked these halls, filled with hope for victory. Now they were survivors. Fighters. The war had changed them all. As Elena neared the command center, she could feel the familiar weight of her decisions pressing on her shoulders. The Kravarr were relentless, and every mistake was one step closer to their final victory. She entered the command center and was immediately greeted by the harsh glow of half-working displays. O'Neill stood near a shattered console, running his hands through his hair, his expression tight. "The jump drives are online, but there's a problem." "The Kravarr flagship?" O'Neill swallowed, grimacing. "It's not as crippled as we thought. They've patched themselves up. And they've sent reinforcements." Elena took a deep breath, mentally bracing herself. "How many?" "3 additional warships. We're outnumbered." She studied the tactical map, her eyes scanning the flickering lights of the Kravarr fleet closing in. The numbers didn't lie. If they didn't act now, they were finished. But a retreat wasn't an option. Not yet. "What's our window?" Elena asked, her voice sharp. O'Neill hesitated. "We have a 30-minute window before they converge on us. After that, they'll be able to track our energy signatures. Then we don't have 30 minutes. We're going now." He blinked, confused. "Captain, we can't jump in time. We'll be sitting ducks." "We don't need to jump. We just need to buy ourselves time," Elena replied. She turned back to the tactical console, tapping out a few commands. "Prepare all remaining torpedoes. I'm going to send a message." "A message?" "Yeah," Elena said, her lips curling into a grim smile. "To remind them that they're not the only ones who can strike first." The Dauntless shuddered again, this time more violently. The Kravarr fleet was closing in, and their sensors would be active soon. Elena's fingers flew across the console, inputting commands that would make any officer cringe. The Dauntless's primary shields were nearly gone, and its weapons were in disarray. But there was one last weapon she hadn't used yet. "Ready," O'Neill said, his voice tense. "Are you sure about this?" Elena's eyes locked onto the tactical display. "No choice, Lieutenant." "You ready?" "Always." With a single command, Elena initiated the sequence. The Dauntless's remaining torpedoes were rigged to detonate within a specific radius, creating a massive, concentrated EMP pulse that would temporarily disable enemy ships' systems. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it would buy them the time they needed. The pulse shot out, spreading outward toward the Kravarr ships. For a moment, everything felt like it had frozen. Then came the moment of truth. The EMP wave hit its target. "Direct hit!" O'Neill shouted, his voice a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. "They're down!" "For now." Elena didn't wait for another second. "Get the jump coordinates set." "Now." But before O'Neill could respond, the warning klaxon sounded. "We've got incoming fire!" he barked. "The Kravarr flagship is back online. Activate the jump drive!" Elena snapped, her heart racing. But as the jump drive hummed to life, a sharp, terrifying vibration tore through the Dauntless. It wasn't a system failure. It was something worse, something far more immediate. The Kravarr flagship had fired. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. The world around Elena exploded into fire and light. The Dauntless was hit, its engines screaming in protest as the shockwave from the blast rattled her bones. A cry echoed through the corridors. The ship lurched, and for a brief, horrifying second, Elena thought they might not make it. But the jump drive was still engaged, and as the ship vanished into the black, she whispered a single word to herself. "Not today!" The jump had thrown Elena into the void, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The Dauntless shuddered violently as it tore through the fabric of space, the jump drive struggling to stabilize. She gripped the console, her knuckles white, trying to maintain her composure as the world seemed to swirl around her. "Status?" she rasped, her voice hoarse from the strain. O'Neill's voice crackled through the comms. a mix of relief and anxiety. "We're through the jump, Captain." "Barely. Shields are holding, but we've got a problem. The Kravarr are right on our tail." Elena didn't need to see the display to know they were in trouble. They had barely escaped the Kravarr flagship's assault, and now they had no safe harbor. They had jumped too far into uncharted space, into the unknown. But it was their only option. There was no going back. "We need to regroup," she said, pushing herself to her feet. "Get to the rendezvous point. I'll handle the rest." "We don't know what we're walking into," O'Neill warned. "There's no telling what's out there. And we're running on fumes." "I know," Elena replied, her voice cold but firm. "That's why we're going to make our own luck. Just get us to that point." The bridge of the Dauntless was alive with frantic activity. The crew worked as if on instinct, moving between the broken systems, rerouting power where they could. The hum of the engines was erratic, but they were pushing forward. Elena walked through the command deck, the weight of her decisions settling on her shoulders. She hadn't made it this far to fall now. The war had taken too much already. This was their last shot. A loud thud interrupted her thoughts, and a warning light flashed red. The tactical display flared with the silhouette of a Kravarr warship, a fresh one, its sleek form gliding into view, cutting off their only route to the rendezvous. "Damn it!" Elena muttered under her breath. The Kravarr were fast, and they'd anticipated her move. She could almost hear the smug laughter of Thor, the Kravarr Grand Marshal, echoing in her mind. "How far out?" she asked. "Too close," O'Neill said, his voice grim. "They're locking weapons." Elena's mind raced. There was no way out. But there was something they could do. She turned toward the command center, her gaze sharp. "Prepare all remaining weapons. Get the anti-ship drones online. I'm going to give them a distraction." O'Neill opened his mouth to protest, but Elena cut him off with a look. "Just do it," she ordered. As the Dauntless spun into a hard turn, Elena's hands moved over the console with the same precision she had honed over years of battle. The Kravarr's ship was already firing, massive energy beams streaking toward them. The ship bucked under the pressure, the shields flickering dangerously. "I need more power to the shields!" O'Neill shouted, but Elena didn't hear him. She was already deep in her strategy, thinking 2 steps ahead. She could already see the trap she was about to set, an all-out assault meant to buy them enough time to break through. "Activate drones." "No," she snapped. The ship rumbled as anti-ship drones launched, zipping toward the incoming Kravarr ship. Elena watched the tactical screen as the drones closed in, taking evasive maneuvers. It wouldn't be enough to defeat the Kravarr, but it would force them to split their focus. For a moment, she saw a flicker of doubt in O'Neill's eyes, but then his face hardened. "This is insane," he muttered, more to himself than to Elena. "Insanity is better than sitting still," Elena replied, never taking her eyes off the display. The drones exploded in a fiery burst, their sacrifice buying Elena the few precious seconds she needed. The Kravarr flagship adjusted its fire, and in that moment of diversion, Elena punched in the coordinates for their next jump, an uncharted system just beyond Kravarr reach. She couldn't afford to be predictable. "We're out of time!" O'Neill's voice cracked through the tension. "They're locking on to us!" Elena gritted her teeth. They didn't have time to hesitate. "Do it! Now!" The jump drive hummed to life once again. A sudden, deafening roar filled the Dauntless as the ship lurched forward, the sound of breaking metal filling the air. The Kravarr flagship had gotten one last shot off, a direct hit to their port side. "I don't think the jump's going to hold," O'Neill shouted. Elena's heart pounded, her thoughts a blur. She could feel the strain in the Dauntless frame as it fought against the incoming damage. And then, as the universe around her began to bend and twist, the jump took hold, tearing the ship from the Kravarr's reach. When the world settled, Elena felt the weight of silence press in on her. She opened her eyes, realizing they had made it. They were far from the Kravarr's grasp, at least for the moment. The ship had emerged in a quiet, distant sector of space, a galaxy of stars and nebulae sprawled in front of them. For a second, it felt almost peaceful. O'Neill staggered forward, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, his voice low and gravelly. "We're alive. But I don't know for how much longer." Elena turned toward the shattered tactical screen, studying the readouts. The jump had drained their energy reserves. The reactor was barely holding together, and the ship was running on fumes. If they didn't find a safe haven soon, they would be dead in the water. "We'll find a way," she said, more to herself than to O'Neill. "We always do." But her confidence wavered as she realized the truth of the situation. They had no allies left. No backup. Just a broken fleet, a decimated crew, and a war they couldn't afford to lose. "Captain," O'Neill spoke up, his voice uncertain. "There's something else. A message just came through. It's encrypted, looks like Kravarr tech." Elena's stomach dropped. "Play it." The message crackled to life, the static clearing to reveal a face she'd hoped never to see again. Grand Marshal Thor. His cold, alien eyes stared into the camera, a cruel smile curling at the corners of his lips. "You cannot escape, human." Thor's voice was smooth, mocking. "You have bought yourself time, but only time. Your fate is sealed. We are already on our way. And when we find you, there will be no more running." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Elena standing in the dark silence of the bridge, her fists clenched at her sides. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. Her eyes locked on O'Neill's, her jaw set with grim determination. "Then we'll make them regret it." But even as she spoke the words, she knew the worst was yet to come. The Dauntless drifted in the silent void, the dim glow of distant stars illuminating the battered hull. Elena stood alone in the command deck, her face set, eyes scanning the cold expanse of space. It had been hours since the Kravarr transmission, but the heavy weight of Thor's threat still hung in the air, suffocating any hope of peace. O'Neill's voice crackled through the intercom, breaking the silence. "Captain, we've reached the coordinates. There's a nearby system, but it's not showing up on any standard charts." Elena's fingers hovered over the controls. She glanced at the flickering readouts, dilapidated, just like the rest of the ship. They couldn't keep running. Every second spent on the fringes of Kravarr space brought them closer to capture. "Bring us in," Elena ordered, her voice low. "We need shelter. And we need it now." The ship shuddered as O'Neill guided them toward the unknown system, a dark pocket of space that seemed to swallow the light. Elena didn't know what to expect, but their options were slim. If there was one thing she'd learned from years of fighting the Kravarr, it was that they couldn't afford to waste time waiting for answers. Not anymore. The ship entered the system, and the faint glimmer of a dying star began to fill the viewports. There was nothing here but empty space. No planets, no stations, just a cold, lifeless place on the edge of nowhere. "Nothing here, Captain," O'Neill's voice sounded from behind her. "No readings, no signs of life. It's just dead space." Elena clenched her jaw. "Keep searching. There has to be something. We can't just float here and wait for the Kravarr to catch up." But as the crew worked to scan every inch of the system, it was clear there was no easy solution. The Dauntless' sensors flickered and sputtered, the damage to their systems starting to show. Elena could feel the fatigue weighing down on her, the pressure of every decision finally starting to take its toll. "Captain," O'Neill said, his voice sharp. "You need to see this." Elena walked over to the sensor array, her eyes narrowing as she read the new readings. "What the hell is this?" A faint signal. It wasn't a ship or a station, nothing that should have been there, at least according to the star charts. But it was unmistakable. The source came from a planet-sized object, hidden within the gravitational pull of the dying star at the system's core. "Could be an outpost, or a derelict," O'Neill suggested. "Maybe a safe house or a research facility, something long abandoned." "No," Elena said, her gut churning. "This isn't on any of our maps. But if we're lucky, it's something we can use." They made their way closer, the Dauntless groaning under the strain of the maneuver. The object grew larger as they approached, and Elena could see its jagged silhouette against the dying star's dim light. It was an ancient construct, an enormous, unmarked space station, its hull cracked and scarred by years of neglect. "This doesn't look like anything we've seen before," O'Neill said, his voice filled with awe. "But there's something inside, Elena. Something alive." "Life signs?" Elena asked, her heart skipping a beat. "No," O'Neill replied slowly. "Not life as we know it. But there's a signature I can't quite place. It's strange." Elena's eyes flickered over the station's decaying structure. She knew the feeling. There was something off about this place, a pull she couldn't ignore. "Dock us. Let's see what's inside," she said, voice firm despite the unease creeping into her chest. "But keep your weapons ready. I don't trust this." The Dauntless docked with the derelict station, and Elena led a small team through the airlock. The metal corridors inside were long abandoned, covered in dust and echoes of a time long gone. Their footsteps echoed through the silence, the air stale, as though the station had been untouched for centuries. The deeper they went, the more Elena felt the weight of the unknown press in on her. The lights flickered erratically above them, casting strange shadows on the walls. She could almost feel the eyes of unseen observers. "Captain," O'Neill's voice was tense, "I'm picking up something in the next chamber. The signal's stronger now." They entered the chamber, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. The room was massive, a central hub with a circular platform at its center. And there, in the middle, stood something that should not have been. A huge, dormant construct. A machine, ancient but clearly sophisticated, pulsed faintly with energy. Its surface was sleek, like blackened glass, and symbols, alien and unfamiliar, glowed faintly across its surface. "What the hell is this?" Elena whispered. O'Neill stepped forward, his eyes wide. "It looks like technology. But not Kravarr. Not anything human either. Elena, this thing is..." O'Neill's voice faltered, and he turned to her. "This thing is alive." Before she could respond, a low hum filled the room. The machine symbols flickered to life, and a low, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Asterisk. "System restored. Awaiting command." Asterisk. The words reverberated through the cold chamber, and Elena's blood ran cold. "What the hell?" O'Neill muttered. "It's talking?" Elena's heart raced. The Kravarr were ruthless, but this? This was something else entirely. This was technology older than anything they'd ever encountered, a force in its own right, one that seemed to have its own purpose. The machine spoke again, its voice clearer now. Asterisk. "Humanity. Identified." Asterisk. Elena's mind raced. She had read about ancient technologies buried throughout the galaxy, but this? This was far beyond what she could have imagined. Asterisk. Humanity. Identified. Asterisk. "What do you want?" Elena demanded, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. The machine paused for a moment. Then its voice returned, slower, deeper. Asterisk. "Survival. Required. Assistance. Offered." Asterisk. A chill ran down Elena's spine. "Assistance? What kind of assistance?" The machine shifted, its enormous form vibrating slightly, and then it opened, revealing a dark, glowing core that pulsed with an energy Elena could feel even in her bones. Asterisk. "Destroy the invaders. Free your species." Asterisk. Cliffhanger ending. Asterisk. Before Elena could respond, a blinding flash of light erupted from the core of the machine, casting shadows across the chamber. The sound of heavy footfalls echoed from the entrance to the station. They weren't alone anymore. The Kravarr had found them. "Captain, we've got incoming!" O'Neill shouted, turning toward the door. "They're here!" Elena didn't hesitate. She raised her weapon and aimed it at the glowing core, her mind made up. Whatever this machine was, it was humanity's last hope. But as the Kravarr forces descended on the station, Elena knew one thing with certainty. They were about to face the ultimate test.